Well. We have a very big twist in the tail. Red Bull have made a tremendous comeback at the Imola Grand Prix. So, yeah, that was a very, very interesting race. Before we get into it, if you do like our content, remember to like, comment, subscribe, do all the YouTube stuff if you're watching on YouTube. And if you're listening on Spotify, remember to follow us so we show up on the feed. But, yeah, that was... Imola seems to be a good weekend the last couple of years, hasn't it? With another wet to dry, wet to dry to wet to dry to wet to dry. It seemed to be on and off
the
all weekend.
yes.
Yeah, so yeah, I've got a few talking points. Let's go straight into the big one, and Max gets the Grand Slam. Gets the qualifying win, the sprint win, and leads every single lap in the feature race.
Do we need a different name other than the Grand Slam, considering it was like a Grandeur Slam?
With the fastest lap, yeah. So
well, because it was also a qualifying and a sprint race, right?
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, he got all of it. So I was thinking of a good like 4 word, and it's like, oh, it's like the Holy Trinity, and then I looked up, but it's not the Trinity.
But Trinity is 3.
Yeah, but I looked up what was there was like the Trinity 4 version. It was some weird word. It was called the Quadrinity, and I'm just like
Quadrinity. Wait, that's cool. What do you mean weird?
But would people even know what I mean? I don't know. So he gets the Quadrinity. But yeah, huge for Max for his championship, and yeah, like I said, huge for Red Bull. They had
I was gonna say not just huge for Max, but huge for Red Bull as well on the other side, right? It was great from both sides of the fence there in comparison. So.
Yeah, absolutely. I guess we'll start at quali, because quali was a bit. If we're talking about sort of raining on and off, that was quali was the one where it was literally on and off.
Even pre-quali, it was a completely rained out practice session too, and so part of it was saying, well, who's going to be quick for quali if it's super wet? But quali wasn't even indicative of the session that practice was, so already they had no idea in those mixed conditions. There seemed to be rain on, rain off, and it was it was really good. It was really interesting watching, going, what is going to go on? And sure enough, it was as far from straightforward as you can get, I think.
Absolutely. We had I don't know what else to say about quali, except for the fact that maybe Max got a little bit lucky that those last runs, obviously the rain came in during that red flag in Q3, where those final runs, no one was really improving, from my understanding. I don't think anyone did. I think the rain just got way too heavy, and it's like...
in the last run... Oh,
I might be thinking of Q2. I might be thinking of Q2. Hold on.
No, because they went out to do their final runs, and then that's when Lando binned it, and I think they didn't have enough time to go around again, right? Yes. So that's when Lando binned it, but then you looked, and Lando was P3, so you went, oh, he's going to feel like a fool, but actually he's quite happy.
He's done well. Yeah.
Was it P4 or 3? He was up there regardless. Yeah,
he was well up there. So P3, because K-Mag got P4, which again, another huge result.
Yes,
quali, so.
It was that white line. That's the other thing to mention from quali. It seemed to be that every car that went off, they went on. They were looking right, and then they suddenly started going left.
They could stay off. We were chatting during the qualifying, and possibly during the race as well, where it's like they must just save that much time by going on that white line, and it must be worth the risk to actually hit that white line to get the angle to go into that corner, that they just kept doing it, but they just couldn't stop. They couldn't stop themselves from going wide to hit that. But if you get it wrong, it's like, you're straight off into the gravel.
You're praying that you can save it. We saw a few guys save it, and then a few guys not super bin it, but bin it enough that they weren't going anywhere by themselves.
Yeah, so a lot of red flags. I think it was it 5 red flags in the end?
It was a lot, yeah.
So many.
Or even yellow flags, because ironically Max set his fastest lap having too slow for a yellow, and it was almost good because we were on board with him, and he really slowed, and yet just because of how things worked out, the rest of his lap was so quick, given I think that was probably the driest period of Q3, that he was that far ahead, and then no one else could actually set any sort of lap, so it was kind of like, here you go. But it set us up really well for what a great weekend to have a sprint race with a mixed up quali like that, right?
Yeah, definitely. So the sprint race, I think it was considering Imola is, they always talk about Imola being this track that's, really, really hard to overtake. And, also it was dry. That was the other thing. It was dry. So again, they didn't have the FP1 was completely wet, and the qualifying is, you can't really take one lap data into a feature race. You probably can a little bit, but again, even then it was sort of wet to dry. And
yes, they're also in Parc Fermé at that point.
Yes,
so even in practice 2, they've always said that practice 2 is kind of redundant. You can kind of do some tyre testing and understand what the tyres are going to do, but then that's more testing for your race rather than your sprint, where that's not really a huge factor.
So again, a little bit of an unknown going into a dry sprint race, but I think it was one of the better ones. I mean, we've had 4, but I think it's definitely at least top 2, so that's good.
I would agree.
Again, considering it's a track that you apparently can't overtake, which I guess getting to the feature race we'll talk about a little bit more, but it was really, really good. We had Sainz had he started P10, well, he got P10 in the quali. He started P10 in the sprint and managed to get up to P4. So, he made a lot of gains in that sprint. Same with Checo. Checo and Sainz were both out of position. I think that was either 7th and 9th or 7th and 10th. You're right. And then both at the start, they both had quite good starts, and then just fought their way up, which I guess shows. There was a bit of showing from both sides of the sprint. I guess both, as we said, probably that kind of tighter midfield pack with some guys trying to figure out if they could gain positions, and some guys maybe like Magnussen, qualified quite high, was struggling a bit to hold on, to his place. And then having to see drivers who may have gotten unlucky in quali being able to fight up a bit to move back up there to where they, should be in the bigger picture. So it did provide a good race. Well,
of course,
I was going to say, speaking of Magnussen and I guess Schumacher as well, they were the only 2 to start on the mediums, and everyone was just like, that's a bit weird.
And Magnussen even came out and saying he expected everyone to be on mediums.
Oh,
and
really?
Then he saw no one, and they said that they expected everyone to be on it, and they were like, "What's going on here?" And I think they realized, what have we done?
We made a mistake here. A bit of a shame because again, Magnussen he qualified P4, started P4. Whatever pace they were, I think a lot of it came down to setup, but whatever pace they didn't have in Australia, they obviously showed they still have it. It was just sort of a that was a one-off, hopefully, in Australia for them. So, but yeah, shame just again, it's strategy stuff and setup stuff that they just kind of got wrong. So I think they kind of need to make better decisions to capitalize on a car that's actually quite good. So
the other bit that set it up interesting for the weekend was, of course, that we had the fight at the front between Max and Charles. And I guess we thought back to last year where Max had the really good start and ousted Hamilton out. And in this case, Max had the poor start. Charles got a bit ahead. We kind of saw a bit of a gap forming there. We thought, well, at least there's some interesting midfield. But then as the tyres played out, still the thought looking at the previous weekends was, will Ferrari better on their tyres? And in the sprint race, we knew the softs would start to wear out to a point, as we've seen from previous sprints, where it does come into play a little bit. That's why some guys try to go mediums. Whether it works or not is another question.
That's it, yeah.
But then we saw that Charles really started struggling and that Red Bulls weren't. And then that gap really started to close up. And then actually there was some fighting going on. And we're like, oh, this is good. This is interesting. And then, of course, we saw Max make the move to get back past him. And even then, it was amazing the speed of the drop-off, because you even saw people like Checo behind actually gained a colossal amount of speed towards the end.
Really fast, yeah.
Yeah, and that kind of set a precedence going to the race, saying, well, actually, maybe the Ferrari, on a new set of tyres, maybe at the start of the race is a bit quicker, but then how's this strategy going to play out? I mean, I even said to you, 2 stop versus 1 stop between the top 2 teams here, right? Weather pending, of course, at that time, course, yeah. But it still set interesting story going into the main race between the top 4 contenders.
Yep, yeah, definitely. So, as you say, Max ended up getting past to take the sprint. I think it was like second last lap in the end. He actually played it very patient. It's very un-Max-like, actually. Maybe he's learning. Ooh.
It was lots of takes like that.
Yeah, so fair play. He is learning. He's learning that maybe don't send it literally at the first opportunity, and he's might get it done.
He's not racing Hamilton anymore.
Yeah, exactly. So, but yeah, it did, like you said, set that precedent that maybe Red Bull are fast, but then you think back to their previous races, and it's like, okay, but their reliability's still dog shit, so they could just explode. It could happen. but yeah, so the sprint I think was very, very intriguing, and I think it's the thought was that if Red Bull can get through, don't have those reliability issues, they're well on for a win here. So I think that the biggest question I had was whether or not it was tire. I've always said I've said for the first few races, it seems like the window of the Red Bull's window for tire temperature seems to be a little bit smaller than the Ferraris, at least from what I've seen so far. So I thought maybe if they're doing, going to the mediums and it's going to take a little bit longer to heat up, I was thinking maybe the Ferrari could get that into the window a bit better. So maybe the feature race could swing in Ferrari's favor just because of the tires. Depending if there's a temperature differential between the Saturday and the Sunday. Obviously, it ended up being Inters at the start anyway. So, but yeah, it turns out that Red Bull still very fast, even in the feature race, as they get their first 1-2 since Malaysia 2016. I didn't realize it had been that long until they said
know.
it.
When you think back, you go,
incredible.
"What? Didn't they just get a driver win a title? How does that work?" I don't remember
mental,
too much disarray last year.
Yeah. So. But yeah, that's I guess leads me to my second point that I had, which is Red Bull back in championship contention after the 1-2.
Wasn't this just the weekend they needed, right? On both fronts, both drivers and constructors championship.
Yeah, I think Max did just sneak back into second. I think he's still away off Charles because he's
still a little off, and he's a few ahead of Checo, but still so much closer than he was.
100%.
Last weekend.
But yeah, Red Bull are only 9 points off Ferrari now. Like it closed the gap that much, which we'll get to Ferrari. We'll get to why
There's more
so
reasons
close,
why
it's. But it's Max. The fun fact that I like is that Max has won every single race this year that he has finished. So it's when you think about it that way, it's kind of it's ominous signs for Ferrari that if Max actually has a car that doesn't fail on him.
Or he's set up in the right window. I guess the argument in Australia was, although he didn't finish in Australia, he was miles off. But there seems to be a lot of word that they completely stuffed the setup at that weekend. If this isn't proof for that as well, I mean, I don't know what is.
Yeah, and I guess speaking of that as well, in their second drivers, Perez has really stepped up, whereas Sainz has sort of he was unlucky in Australia, and he was unlucky here, but. Yeah,
he had mixed elements of unlucky, but still elements of his own downfall. Like the reason he started low in quali was because he went off on his own. He did crash out when others didn't. Yes, he did all right to get back up to fourth, but he still then had to start in the middle of the mid-pack when he could have potentially been a third or even a second if he kept it clean right. I mean, even I touted him to have quite good pace, and even in the wet and free practice one, I guess another comment is the Ferraris and especially Sainz looked really comfortable in the wet.
They looked
when it came to the race,
far the best in the wet. Yeah,
I know. So we're thinking when we saw the wet start, especially when the previous day the Red Bulls had a struggle with the start, you thought, oh well, they're just going to get off again and then they'll have to catch through. But instead, as we saw, that's not really what played out. That meant that Sainz was again back in the pack. To be fair, if we're going to quickly touch on the incident between himself and Ricciardo, I think Sainz didn't really do anything wrong in that case, other than the fact that he just was not in the lead, I guess, away from other people. That's the only thing he did wrong.
Yeah.
And then he just got a really unlucky tap, and it's like...
Yeah, you can't really blame him. But I think the quote that I had was from you. Was your quote, and it just had to be Sainz again, didn't it? It's his love affair with gravel traps continues. Hopefully that finishes here for him, but that's 2 races in a row he's gotten beached in the gravel. The first was his own fault. The second one, it's hardly his fault, at least in the race sense. But like you say, he could have he could have done more in the qualifying to not have to, the fact that he went from 10th to 4th in the sprint race shows that that car was really, really quick. So if he had started the sprint race maybe in 4th or 3rd even,
I even just started the race in 3rd.
Yeah.
And even if he has a bit of an unlucky start, he doesn't fall as backfire as he did, and he's not in that much of the mess. And
it's all butterfly effect shit,
yes.
isn't it? So
it did. It starts from him running onto that white line they all love, and then look how it trails off for the rest of it. And it's probably playing on the back of his mind the whole weekend too. You know, it's amazing how much one little error can just play on you, and you can't let it go. And
So let's move to the other side of the Ferrari garage. And my 4th point I had was Charles gets greedy and eats too much sausage curb.
He has his dinner a bit too early.
So Charles was running after that start, he dropped back. He actually had he had the poor start in the feature race that allowed Perez to jump into 2nd. And that was Red Bull sort of more or less controlled the race.
He even fell back to 4th. Lando got him too. So
yes,
he fell
that's right.
Not just 2nd, but to 4th.
That's right. I forgot about that. And Red Bull more or less controlled the race. Charles did eventually catch up to Perez and have some good battles with him, but it always seemed to end up with Perez back in front in some capacity. So towards the end of the race, it was very much damage limitation for Charles. It's like, okay, come home for a P3, try and get that fastest lap. Obviously, we saw the pit stop that he came in for, which then allowed Perez to pit stop, which then allowed Verstappen to pit stop for all those softs. So he would have to actually put in probably a pretty good lap to get the fastest lap, given that the two in front of him also could have gone for fastest lap. Given that he gave them the window to do that. So kind of
I was
ironic,
only going to mention that point. It seems a handful of people brought up that they don't get why they stopped him, because they thought, well, they was just going to stop anyway. But I thought, well, look, given this is Imola and anything can happen, if he had have stopped on those softs and a safety car came out and the two in front didn't have a chance to box, right? It's like, would he prefer to be on old mediums with those two or on fresh softs when they're on new mediums, right? So it's like, if he's got that gap, yes, he had to overtake Lando, but that was going to be a piece of anyway, right?
Which we found it was,
So although it looked like on face going, well, let's try go for the fastest lap, and I think anyone that's going to do that anyway, in the past when we saw Hamilton or Max or someone like a Bottas or Checo do it, they basically did it on the second last lap, because then that doesn't give the guys in front any chance to do it, right? So that's normally when they do it. But we even saw that even Red Bull, who tried to cover him off, actually meant that he closed up right behind him. So even if they thought there's a chance Red Bull will close it off, he actually got really close to Checo, because I think something else we saw...
Ricciardo came in first. He was the very first to go onto those slicks.
Yes.
And I'm sitting there watching him at the back. I'm like, is he fast? Is he fast? And he just started to eat chunks away at his deficit. And it's like... okay, everyone's going to start coming in, and then people started
Vettel was
in,
the second one, which actually turned out to be in his favour. He made up some spots through that. I just realised the battle I was thinking of actually was early on when Charles was a few seconds behind Checo. And I think Checo stopped first, and Charles stopped the lap after. And Charles actually came out about a second ahead of him, which everyone was like, whoa, what the hell? How has that happened? But then that tyre warm-up was so different, so Checo just went through
past,
him. Which was an example, which we saw later on, of saying Checo then kind of stopping second, and Charles was on him, but Checo was able to just cover it off. And then, I mean, I think another theme there was almost a trend of saying with Red Bull when they kind of had to push, is that they still had a bit in the pocket. I mean, there was a bit kind of midway through the race where we might talk about it separately, when DRS started to be activated after forever, who knows how long, when there was about 20 laps of commentators going, can we get some DRS for Mr. Hamilton, please, Mr. Director?
That's literally the only reason they wanted it, isn't it?
And when they finally turned it on, and you kind of saw that gap between Charles and Checo was still quite close, and then you felt like they're giving him the call to hurry up, and then Checo seemed to just go, okay, bye-bye, and just ran away. It was like, oh, okay, obviously they're kind of just, again, managing the tyres, going, we know we've got the advantage, let's not press any harder than we have to.
It's very, very clever. So, but I guess moving back to Charles, he was, like you said, gaining on Perez, and then just tried to treat that chicane as one corner, and didn't seem to work out. Just absolutely ate that curb. Went spinning, went sort of backwards and hit the wall enough to damage the wing. So
he got that lucky hit, right? It's the same as Hamilton hit it a few years ago in Germany, where if they have a proper side impact and the pressure is kind of spread equally and the wheels aren't turned, you can get away with it because the car can kind of take it. But that's really it's pure luck. I mean, you look at Yuki in his first year when he went in there a bit backwards and his car at the back just went.
Yeah, yeah, that's it. He was. So I think his was like super inconspicuous as well. It's just like and yeah, his. I think you needed a gearbox. It's like. Cool. Yeah. It's the fine margins, isn't it? So, but yeah, so he had to come in and replace the wing because he couldn't really turn left all that well. What they were saying, I'm not sure how true that was, but he looked like he was pretty slow. So,
I think to be honest, let's say they could have kept him out for a lap with the wing and just sorted out, but they said no for the sake of making sure we potentially identify an issue so we don't crash the car because I mean. Cost savings and everything, they really don't want to do that. And
also risk a puncture if the piece of the wing,
right?
Things like
get a fresh set on and then just try salvage a result. They probably got him in, pulled off the wheel, a quick check and go, that looks okay, you're good to go. Peace of mind out of there. He did. I mean, Charles did come on the radio, I think, a lap after that and say this is handling a bit funny. I mean, I'd still expect it to handle a bit funny after a bit of a crunch like that, but he still was able to pick up a few places and obviously had some pace there. So better to be safe than sorry rather than keep it out and then something blows into the wall and then it's like, oh my god, why wouldn't you come in and just be safe? And
exactly. So he was running third. He dropped back to ninth after pitting. Did manage to salvage sixth. So
a fair salvage considering.
So he literally got all the places that it was possible for him to get because I think fifth was Bottas. Like I don't know, like 10, 15, 20 seconds up the road. So who was having a great scrap with George, by the way. Towards the end, it was kind of role reversal from Imola last year. I was watching that down the main straight, thinking it's happening again. Anyway, but yeah, so that's the reason why Red Bull is so close to Ferrari. Is no points for Sainz and very few points for Charles in that feature race, whereas Red Bull take quite literally the maximum points they could have on that Sunday. So. Yeah, it makes it interesting.
For the Sunday, correct.
Yeah, for the Sunday, So, but yeah, that was wasn't that fun. I wanted to,
and we got to see the live reaction from the cool down room as well.
Oh yeah, cool down room's back.
Cool down room, which is interesting. We haven't seen that since the Hamilton Rosberg. I'm not talking to you. You're not talking to me.
Yeah, I was about to say we haven't seen enough throwing hats at each other. That's what I missed that. I missed that one.
Whipping earphones into eyeballs.
Yeah. That's what I want. So.
Yes.
It was all a bit too nice for me, I think. So.
Yes.
And I guess really the only other point I had, it's more of a general point, but we had 8 out of 10 teams in the points as well. And in saying that, the final 2 teams were 11th and 12th, so just outside the points.
How good?
Albon for Williams and Ocon, because Alonso retired.
He was the lowest place Alpine.
Yeah. So Alpine, which again we know Alpine has pace, and I think if
it's
Alonso,
like you'd expect that, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I think if Alonso had not gone out with that damage after being hit by Mick early on, there's a very good chance we could have had 9 of the 10 teams in the points as well. So that midfield is very, very spicy. I think it's like we've said before. It's can sort of swing any way, and you have to really be there to capitalize when like Vettel did, like Aston Martin did with a double points finish. I
mean, big point. This kind of confirms. I mean, we made those jokes in our podcast going, I think, I mentioned kind of saying we don't have a proper back end, and we went, well, maybe we still do, Williams, but then actually, yes, there was a lot of craziness out here, but I think there weren't too many teams that necessarily got like a free pit stop or a free move here, right?
I mean, the main move that we saw,
that's the thing. They were out there. Yeah. I mean, Vettel was kind of. They had a lot of on-track time when cars could have been passed, right? Let's be real. And yet Vettel was kind of, he was running, I think it was like 9th or 10th. He boxed early to get on those soft mediums or whatever dry tire he picked early, which I assume paid out. I wasn't keeping tabs on him, but he finished, higher than where he stopped. So obviously
he finished
got
P8,
something out of there, right?
So they got P8, P10. He was running P7 for a long time, and then I think he got bopped by Sonoda. For P7, I think it was.
They had a good fight near the end, yeah.
So, Yeah, so...
But they were up there on pace, and let's be real, this wasn't a race where we had a ton of retirements. Like, yes, we had Alonso retire, but I think he was at their level anyway.
Yep.
Yes, we had Sainz retire, but then that's one car. Even if all cars had finished and they got 9th and 11th, you'd still go, well, that's a decent performance. That's literally in the middle of the field, you know?
Absolutely, yeah.
So I think the takeaway, and with Albon in 11, quite close to a point, really, we really, again, have kind of no back end. There's like a midfield. There's kind of maybe a bit of a tail, you'd say, where maybe on an average case is still...
Yeah, you still got like your Williams, your Astons, the AlphaTauris are sort of they're doing the AlphaTauri thing where they're sort of they're really strong and then they're really poor and who knows what.
Yeah.
But again, it's every week it seems to be different. So
no, it's not when you see, like, for example, a Williams get into, I don't know, let's say get into like a Q2 or an Aston get into, like I think Vettel even qualified for Q3, didn't he? Got into Q3, right? Because that's how he qualified so high. And yes, there was the weather and everything, but still, I mean, even when he was up there, there was, I guess, a little bit of going, oh, it's good to see him up there. This isn't where they normally are. But there was also another side going, well, actually, no, this is kind of where they should be given everything. It feels like when a team does bad, you go, oh, this isn't where they should be. But then you say, but then where should they be? Because there's always going to be a team at the bottom. And then you see Williams at the bottom, you go, oh, this isn't where they should be because they've been fighting for years. And then you see AlphaTauri going out in Q1. Oh, this isn't where they should be. It's like, well, that's kind of where we're at now, actually.
See, that's the thing. That's with our predictions. That's why I think we both went Alfa Romeo, because we're like, this is, with Williams were on the up, and Haas were putting so much time into their, Haas and Aston Martin and Alpine, and putting so much time in their restructuring and all this, focus on the 2022, and you didn't really hear about Alfa Romeo sort of doing a huge amount. That was, and you looked
at the driver lineup and you went, okay, it could be a bit iffy.
Yep. And and then you have Bottas pulling out seemingly every single race. He's just like top of the midfield.
Fine.
It's like,
he's like,
okay, cool.
You go, it's funny reflecting, going, actually, his team change was actually a team change up the field almost. You would have imagined saying that last year, moving to Alpha, you thought, oh, he's pulling another Kimi, he's moving to the back of the field to retire. It's like, no, he's literally battling their main Mercedes driver while their other driver is in no man's land. Don't even need to talk about that lap. Hamilton and Verstappen, amazing. You heard it in Crofty's voice, a bit of, and this is happening, and everyone's like, change of guard.
Yeah, it really is. So, Hamilton got stuck in that once the DRS got going, that DRS train behind, who was it? Who have we got? We had
it was Albon.
Ocon, Albon, Gasly. I don't know if Albon actually had DRS to Ocon in front.
He didn't. No. But when they didn't have DRS, they were kind of together. And then when the DRS came on, the general vibe was, well, they'll both just find a way to get past Albon.
Yeah, and Gasly didn't.
But then they didn't, and you kind of went further affirmation that Albon's doing all right, and that even without DRS, he's able to stay up there. And credit, I think, to Gasly. We saw almost every lap on board with Hamilton going to T1, where Gasly actually kind of had to defend every lap. They weren't just going in line of stone. He was moving, he was defending, and he almost did that for like 25, 30 laps in a row. And I was just like, God damn, like, to keep that up, not make a fault when you've got someone like Hamilton behind you. Yes, they weren't fighting for points, but still, it shows how all the way up the field, just, again, what we'd hope cars at least could follow nose to tail, not having to break off and go back in. We did have at least something, a little trio of cars that could have changed at any moment. I mean, it didn't, I think at the end of the day, change it all.
The one real chance that Hamilton had was when I think Perez was coming through. And then he got past Gasly, and Gasly got the DRS off Perez.
Yes.
And then he couldn't get past anymore, and he got stuck behind him again. It's just like, oh no. It's like worst case scenario for him. That was literally his only opportunity, is he needed Perez just to be Gasly out of DRS zone of Perez,
or anyone coming through the back markers to try and get a bit lucky there. And they did get close.
Yeah,
but
he did
again,
try.
I think,
but no.
I think a general case that everyone was quite on it, I think, for most of the weekend, right? Most of the battles we saw were quite clean. There was a lot of really close kind of defending and moving. I mean, we saw a little bit of, I think, flags in the sprint race for weaving, but then outside of the sprint race, there was a few knocks or tussles. I mean, there was between Zhao and Ocon, I think, but that was, again, a pretty minor thing. And even between Ricciardo and Sainz was pretty minor. Overall, it was a pretty tidy, and some people, I think, have labelled it a bit dull, which I think is fair if you're kind of watching casually. And compared to the first few races,
it was a good sort of 30, 40 laps where it was just,
it
not
was
a
kind of
lot
sitting
happened,
there,
yeah,
but
so-
I think I said to you at the time, I was still enjoying it because it was kind of like, it was tense. There was still like a lot that could happen at any moment.
Yeah.
And that's nicer rather than having every card that's like 4 seconds between each other. And you're kind
Yeah.
of just going, well, like, there's nothing happening. Maybe someone's starting to make a bit of a push, or someone's slowing down a bit, or someone's got an exhaust issue.
Yeah,
But in this case, at least there was still, at least 1 or 2 onboards every lap of someone trying a move, or someone, getting a better run out of the chicane, or so it's still, I still felt like the laps ticked by quite quickly, despite the fact there wasn't too much happening there.
Yeah, there was also, I mean, they pitted for those mediums, probably relatively early, so there was still the thought of, could those mediums go off? There was still rain around, so there's the threat. They actually had spots on the track literally 2 laps from the end, so there was still that threat of like, could it rain again? It's been doing that all weekend, sort of on and off. Will they need to do what they did at Russia last year? Is it going to rain 5 laps before the end, and we'll have things going all over the place? So there was still that. I can see why it was a little bit dull, but I think that's probably more just the again, the track still being a bit of a hard overtaking track. Even with that DRS down the main straight, it still seemed a bit tough. So there's always that middle period where there's a little bit of a lull, obviously, unless safety cars happen or red flags happen, that kind of shake things up.
Or it's super high degradation, right?
Or high
then you
deg,
kind of get your first stop out the way, which normally happens in the first third or so, and then you have the start of the next stint, which is normally when most people are preserving or saving battery or harvesting, and then it's really only once everyone's kind of got their battle plan for the last 5 laps that you see maybe a bit more action going on.
Yeah, for sure. So I guess the only thing I haven't really talked about is the Norris P3. Despite
a pretty safe P3.
Yeah, really safe P3. He was running his like lonely race out there. I don't really understand it, but I don't understand a lot of stuff this season, so just add it to the pile, I guess. Have McLaren done anything? Norris, from what Norris's like body language and the way he's talking, it seems like they haven't really done anything. Could it just be another Australia where it's like the conditions and the track suited their car? I
think part that, and I think part that, similar to what we were saying to Sainz, is he kind of was starting always at the top of the midfield, and there'd be the start, there'd be a bit of chaos. It helped in the feature race that when he started, he kind of made that place it was it would have been, was it Sainz and Leclerc he would have made it on, because he started 5th, right?
He started
5th.
I don't. Yeah, he would have started 5th because Sainz.
So he started 5th, so he made it past both of them.
Yeah.
Sainz started 4th, Checo
Yes.
third.
Yeah, he started 5th.
Leclerc 2nd. So he made it at the start. He got past both of them, and yes, he got passed back by one of them, but it still helped that doing that at least then set him like a 5-second gap ahead of the midfield, and that midfield still was quite squabbly. A lot of defending, a lot of probably strategy saving tyres and that. So the fact that right at the start he could get that gap meant that no one was kind of sucking off his slipstream, he wasn't defending from anyone, and then he could just really focus on just having pace out there. It seemed like anyone that was out there by themselves actually had really good running, and he kind of was just the poster child for that, and therefore, I mean, behind him there was kind of Russell and Bottas there-ish, but then they more seemed to be playing their strategy and fighting around each other, so it seemed like that's what Sainz needed, If Sainz had that start similarly, even if he wasn't near... Even if he wasn't near Perez or Verstappen or Leclerc, he still, you'd say, would be a comfortable 4th, no qualms, no issues. And yet, that was instead Norris there. And being in the right place, right time, with Leclerc making his issue, he's just like, done deal.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Yeah. So that just shows how fine edge, I mean, look at Ricardo. Ricardo's stuck in the middle, gets in an instant, then has to box. If you just near that front of it and you get clear, a world of difference. It's amazing when everyone's so tight there. And I think that's where a lot of comments coming from Magnussen while he was saying that's like, it's really just, even at tracks where it's easy to overtake, still just starting near the front when everyone's so close,
so
you
beneficial.
can potentially get that breakaway. Yeah, and then you can actually save so much because it's just so much less chaos to figure out. You're not just fighting one car, but you're fighting a guy that's 5 places back and 2 places forward, and you're trying to figure all of that out. It's so I'd attribute it to that if it's a little confusing, but really just being able to do your own thing, which normally everyone could do in the past because everyone's apart. But instead he was like the only guy that was by himself, and therefore
Yeah.
free P3.
Yeah, he and Verstappen were really the only two that sort of...
Yes.
It was...
Perfect example, both of them.
I guess it was weird, because I think really there was a really long period there where pretty much the entire top 7, minus the Charles Perez battle, that was within a second. That was when they were battling. That top 7 were all sort of running their own race. There was at least
they had
3+ seconds, between, front in front of them and 3+ seconds behind them. So we're just sort of going through and doing their own thing. Again, that was Russell in that Mercedes, which we know is still not a good car at the moment, as we saw with Hamilton, and that porpoising is. I don't know if the Russell's and Hamilton's setup were slightly different or what it was.
They did seem to argue they went in very different setup directions.
Yeah.
I think Russell afterwards was talking to Sky, and they understandably asked him to say, well, look, they were saying on the radio to Hamilton going, yeah, we know we've given you a bad car, sorry. And everyone's going, well, that might be the case, but look at Russell over here. And he seemed to say, no, look, they did try drastically different things, and he found a really sweet spot with it while Hamilton didn't. And I guess again, another byproduct of only having one practice session that doesn't really mean anything. That car seems to be where they really need to get it in a sweet spot, as they did in Melbourne, right, where they're actually able to run somewhat comfortably together and nearish to the top of the midfield. While here, one car got it right, one car out the toilet, out the window, having fun at the back.
Yeah, so I think Mercedes, they're still, this still third, because they keep getting these somehow like podium P4s, somehow good top 10 finishes. Obviously well done, George. I still don't think that's a P4 worthy car, but he proved us wrong. I think they're still in, Mercedes is still in that championship contention as of right now. Still very early. They're third in the championship. But I don't, that porpoising looked really bad. You would think now at race 4 they would start to be making some gains, but it looked worse than it has at any other race so far on Hamilton's car. So they're obviously...
think about the amount of effort that's going to take to change. It's not kind of like some other teams that have... Perfect example, you'd say McLaren, probably started on a similar bad foot.
Yep.
Have been open to saying they've only brought minor things, but have really just focused on the data and changing, and then they've been able to tweak it a bit. Well, it seems like the Mercedes is like, no, there is no tweaking. This is it. We've got to just overhaul it with new things, and that's it.
Yeah. So I just think it's going to be a long time before we see them actually. I think they could be. I think they could be competitive. I just think it's going to be a long time before they get their issues sorted. So despite the fact that they're still technically in contention, it would take a miracle for them to really be in contention, I think, for the entire season. So I think
there's nothing being said internally that makes you think that they're being very honest to, I guess, more so their fans as well, right? How many bloody fans would they have, considering, look, if this is your first year,
considerably
just
less
the last
this
few
year,
years.
I imagine. So,
yes.
Yeah. Unfortunately.
Not just because we were at Imola. Maybe look at a different circuit, which isn't... Miami might be a good circuit, actually. I guess they wouldn't have a strong affinity to a specific team.
Yeah, I'm not sure. It'd be interesting to see that, actually. We'll talk...
Haas fans, mind you, but not strong... Strong affinity. They don't have an American driver either, so it's not like they're going to follow a specific team like they would for Australia or something like that.
True, yeah. Those are the only points I had, though, so did you have anything else you wanted to talk about before we wrapped it up, or...
I don't know. I think maybe one point I could have addressed earlier, but maybe I'll bring it up. I thought, I think with the rain, it was good at the start, but then I think there was a period where we could have had some good racing where it kind of hurt, because they were saying as well that it was drying, but it was drying really slowly, and really the racing line was only drying because they were going over it. And what that meant is even if you had an advantage on someone, for a long time you really couldn't pull out to go for a move, because then suddenly you're in a lot of water. And I believe early on there was an example with Stroll and an AlphaTauri, I don't remember who it was, but they were going into the second last corner. And he kind of took the inside line, and suddenly you just saw water go everywhere, right? Yeah. And you kind of gave him kudos for going for it, but that was kind of a sign of going, hey, even if you try to find a place to make a move, you cannot leave the line. And it's like, well, then how do you make a move? It's really only to T1, and I think enough cars there were kind of taking a different line where a dry defensive line also formed into T1, which is what Gasly and co were using every lap. So I think when people were arguing a lot about potentially, the regs not actually helping here, I think actually a lot of it comes down to the fact that they had to be really careful. And I think more credit to the drivers that there wasn't that many incidents that were rain wet patch related, right? You could argue maybe Leclerc, if that curb was super clear, he might have had a chance, but really he did just bloody smash it and go over it. So there was some credit, I think, that he broke a bit late, and because it was damp, I think this is what Rosberg said, that he seemed to brake quite late. And I think Checo in the cool down room also said that actually through that chicane, he was gaining like 2 or 3 tenths through the lap, and Checo had to make it elsewhere. He was apparently one of the most confident drivers into that chicane, and maybe he was really, at that point, he was going for all or nothing to get past Checo.
Yeah.
Maybe he broke really late, stuffed it up a bit, and was forced to turn in early. We saw what happened. But I think it wasn't a fair assessment on these regulations at Imola, because I think once you only had that dry line, it made it a little tricky. And I guess we didn't have DRS from the start, and I still like to see rain, but I thought that was at least worth a thought.
I think having another shower as it was, like if they went onto slicks and then, we started to have some more rain, probably would have made it a bit more exciting again, more strategy involved rather than, like you said. But, it is what it is. It's just kind of...
Or if the whole race was on dry tyres, I think that 2 versus 1 really would have come into play. It was just enough for most people to comfortably make it on a 1. The really only reason the other guy stopped was just strategy again, and they had the room to play with to Lando. So I don't think it's a fair assessment. I've seen a few people go, "Oh, that wasn't that great, and we should, maybe reassess the circuit." I'm like, I think there's too many other variables. It's hard to say.
The last point I'll mention, which I forgot to mention when we were talking about, I guess Charles's error, is we talked up, I think last race, about how Charles had sort of overcome his mistake-prone self, and this is just kind of the first glimpse at the old Charles coming back. So it's a little worrying from Ferrari / Charles fans' perspective, because you've seen that in the past, where it's like you can see his pace, and then he just makes this one error, and it's just a snap moment that it's an error in judgment, and he loses what should have been a win, or in this case an easy P3 or potentially a P2. I know obviously because he was pushing, that's what forced him into the mistake.
For the mistake,
but
right,
for the sake of argument, let's just say there was P2 was on. It's just something that Charles of I don't know if I saw it much last year, but Charles of sort of 2020 2019 would have done. I'm hoping he does learn from that, because I don't want to see him throwing away wins. This one was a P3 to a P6, so it could have been a lot worse, but he can't be throwing away wins, especially with the Red Bull showing this sort of pace, and Max showing this sort of form at the moment. So he can't afford to do it. It's not just throwing away a win; he could be throwing away a championship. So for Charles fans, let's hope that as little of those as possible. So let's see if we can get back to the Charles of the first 3 races. So.
People don't want to see another veteran league thrown into the wall at Germany at the peak, and then the downfall spiral of Singapore and Monza and America and the birth of Spinello. I don't. Please, no more birth of a new.
No. They already put. You said they already put away the clown gear. I don't want to see it come back.
Yes.
Don't bring it back.
To its credit, that wasn't on the team. No, the team still, I don't think, have it on. Let's be real.
No, they put the clown gear in the back of Charles's car this time around.
Yes.
Forgot to pack it away into a box and send it off somewhere. Anyway.
Yes.
But yeah, we'll see. I just want to see a good championship fight like we did last year. I don't really care.
And
who
to be
wins,
fair, this has come at a point where it actually sets it better. At least it's come now, and it's actually set it to be better in motion for a close fight.
Yeah.
It's not like it's come when it's critical that he has a good weekend. Again, if we had a weekend where he was out in front and there was a close battle, but then Max spinned it, or they had a failure even in one of the cars, we would have gone we might still have an exciting race, but to be able to now almost close, there's still a gap there, but be able to close a significant chunk of it still early on almost puts it back to go, now both teams are now going to be a little more, Ferrari now a little more nervous, going, oh, we've binned it up, we've got to get back on it, and Red Bull going, hey, bloody hell, that was a cracker. I saw their celebrations after the race. They were celebrating like they'd won a championship. They were crazy. They were like, but yes, we're back in it.
Massive,
admittedly, I was a bit like, it's the fight's back on, thank God.
It's exactly what the championship needed from like a viewer perspective, that's for sure. So and for Red Bull, I guess, but who cares? It's all about us. So it's
yes. Hey, let's be real. It is. We're the ones paying the subscription money to watch it.
It's true. Yeah, you better be paying subscription money. If you're not, then I'm gonna call the police on you. All right, that's it. That's all I've got. We'll wrap it up here. This has probably got a bit longer than it should have, but anyway, thanks for watching, everyone. Like I said, remember to comment your thoughts. Do you think we'll have another championship fight like we did Mercedes Red Bull last year? Let us know your thoughts. Remember to like if you like, subscribe so you see us, see our videos in your feed if you're on YouTube, and follow our Spotify so we show up in your feed. But yeah, that's it from us. We'll see you, I was gonna say for the podcast, but that may or may not happen. I'm going away for the weekend, so we'll see if we can record something before then, but you may or may not see a podcast this weekend. If you don't, then we'll see you for the
Miami
preview. Yes,
which is touted to be a very, very big event. So looking forward to that.
Should be good. All right. Well, take care, everyone. We'll see you at the next video.
Catch ya.